I've been a truck driver for almost 12 years now. This happened back in 2019, during a long haul through Montana, right in the middle of January. I was hauling a load of lumber from Billings to North Dakota. The route stretched across miles of snow-covered plains, with nothing but fields, and every now and then, a lonely gas station in the middle of nowhere. The blizzard that night had just ended, but the road was still coated in ice, and the air felt like it could freeze my lungs with every breath. It was past 3 a.m., and the highway was practically deserted. My headlights cut through the darkness, reflecting off patches of ice along the way. I was exhausted, my eyes burning after hours of staring at the lines on the asphalt. I thought about stopping at the next rest area, but I was behind schedule and didn't want to lose my trip bonus. I convinced myself to keep going for another hour or two before pulling over. That's when I saw something up ahead. 2 faint red lights flickering in the distance. I thought it might be a deer, or maybe a highway department car with its hazards on. But as I got closer, I realized it was a silver sedan, parked right in the middle of the icy road. Its hazard lights flashed weakly, and the driver's side door was wide open. I slammed on the brakes, and my truck slid dangerously across the frozen pavement before stopping just a few feet from the car. My heart was pounding. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out into the cutting cold. The silence was unsettling. No wind, no animals, just the faint clicking of the hazards echoing across the empty plains. The car looked fairly new, maybe a Toyota Camry, but there was no one inside. I checked the front seats, the back seats, even crouched down to see if someone was hiding. Nothing. The keys were still in the ignition, but the engine was off. That was the first time that night I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. Something was wrong. I kept glancing around, trying to spot any movement in the white fields, but there was nothing, just darkness. Against my better judgment, I decided to check the trunk. I grabbed the keys from the ignition and tried to open it. I heard the latch click, but the lid wouldn't lift. It felt jammed from the inside. I climbed into the back seat and pulled the release. The lid cracked open just enough for me to see 3 black trash bags tied tightly with thick cord. My stomach dropped. I raised the flashlight, leaning closer to get a better look, when suddenly a deafening gunshot ripped through the night. I panicked, smacking my head against the doorframe as I stumbled backward. I dropped the keys on the seat and bolted toward my truck. As I was climbing into the cab, I heard a rough, aggressive voice shouting in the darkness. Heavy footsteps crunched against the snow, getting closer. I fired up the engine, my hands shaking so badly I almost stalled it. In the glow of the headlights, I saw a figure standing by the open trunk. He was a short, stocky man, maybe in his 40s, with a thick beard and a flannel jacket. In one hand he held a rusted shotgun, in the other a long crowbar. His face wasn't twisted in rage like I expected. It looked desperate. He kept shouting "wait" and waving his free hand. But there was no way I was stopping. I slammed it into gear and sped off, my tires skidding across the ice. In the mirror, I saw him drop the crowbar and chase after my truck for a few seconds before sprinting back to his car. I thought I'd shaken him off after a few minutes, but then I saw headlights appear behind me. They grew brighter, closing in fast. My chest tightened when I realized it was the same sedan as before, riding my trailer's bumper and honking nonstop. I dialed 911 with one hand while gripping the wheel with the other, yelling at the dispatcher and trying not to lose control on the frozen highway. Her voice kept telling me to stay calm, but the car was nearly ramming me on every curve. After about 15 minutes of this, I finally saw flashing red and blue lights ahead. The sedan suddenly swerved onto a side road and disappeared into the snowy darkness. I pulled over onto the shoulder, my heart still racing. When the officer walked up to my cab, I spilled the whole story at once. But instead of going after the man, he just took notes and said he'd wait for backup before starting a search. I begged him to chase the guy, but the officer just shook his head and said they'd handle it. They never called me back. No updates. To this day, I don't know what was inside those bags. Some of my friends swear they had to be bodies. Others think it might have been game meat or something illegal. For the sake of my sanity, I tell myself it was just trash. But every time I drive through Montana in the winter and see that endless stretch of white road, I remember that night. And no matter how much time passes, I still hear that gunshot echoing in the frozen air. Impossible to forget.
Thank you so much for your company. If this story kept you hooked, don't forget to click on the card to watch the next story.